Welcome everyone. My name is Prima. So this is the May 4th, the final day of the Career Week series. We have gone through going through your CVs, going through your LinkedIn, making sure that everything's good. And then we move on to handling tech interviews with Diego's and Sam Randall's on last Friday, on May 1st, on Labor's Day. And now the final session is on startups, right? So I believe some of you here most of you are alumni, some of you are not. Welcome. And as you notice, Wagon is a product-driven coding bootcamp. So I expect some of you are also wanting to create a startup at some point. So welcome you guys. And here we have, first, before we start, I want you to, we will try to make this session as interactive as possible. So before we start, I just want to do some icebreaker for everyone to join into slido.com. So you can go to slido.com and then put that ID 62558, or you can scan that QR code. Just want to get a temperature check. What exactly are you fitting in at the moment within for this series? Are you someone who has an idea and scared to start? Do you have an idea or don't know where to start? Or you already started building something, so we can find out exactly where you at. And while you guys are voting for the poll, this will be the main communication channel for the questions. As I said, we'll try to make it as interactive as possible. At some point, I will probably, just something that we're trying new things. We'll probably ask you guys to, if you have any specific questions, please use the raise hand features. And then we'll ask you to turn on your video and you can talk to the panels directly. Okay, so it seems like majorities here have an idea, but they don't know where to start. So that's good. A few of you don't have an ideas, right? So you might want, hopefully we can get an ideas at this point after this. But yeah, today, hopefully we can dissect about what's exactly gonna happen if you have an ideas and you wanna start your ideas into a reality, into a company, and also about how you handle it at this unpredictable times, okay? So before we start, just introductions, a very quick introduction about Wagon. We are coding bootcamps with a lot of campuses from different cities. We've started in Bali since 2 years ago, and then we started in Singapore last year. So obviously, if you have any interest to join our bootcamp, the next bootcamp is gonna happen on May 18th. Part-time is currently running. So if you want to join part-time, so you cannot commit full-time for this course, you can also come for our part-time courses that will last from July 18th to December 18th. We have a discount for those who are considering going through the full-stack programs. And we also just like recently got a funding opportunities available for Singaporeans. So we definitely, if you are Singaporeans or you are a PR, you'll get a affordable discount for the bootcamp itself. And also, just to give a heads up, we are not just coding bootcamps for those who are wanting to learn how to code. For those who have someone who has a company and then they are willing to upskill their employees, we are also offering their services in our offerings, right? So we're not just a typical coding bootcamp, we also do something else with companies and universities as well. And yeah, last but not least, let's introduce our speaker for today. We have a great friend of mine, actually, Gerald. He's one of my alumni as well. He's a coding bootcamps graduate. He is now a co-founder for Millieu Insight, and he has been around for a while with Milieu. I know Milieu is actually one of his projects to begin with during the bootcamp, and he actually take it further after the bootcamp. And we also have Serene, which is a co-founder of Speedoc, super busy right now, a telemedicine company. But yeah, I'll give them the floor to Gerald and Serene to introduce themselves. Maybe you can start with Serene.
Oh my God, I thought you were going to start with Gerald. But anyway, hi everybody. My name is Serene. We run a company called Speedoc, and we try to be an aggregator of all on-demand healthcare services. So if you want a doctor, you can book a doctor to come to your house via your phone. You want to video consult a doctor, you can do it through the app. You want to call an ambulance, a nurse, you can do it through our app. So that's what we do.
Gerald?
Yeah, is it my turn? Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Hi, I'm Gerald. I'm founder and CEO of Millieu. So as Prima mentioned, I founded a company about 3 years ago after I attended a coding boot camp. And basically we are a consumer insights company. And the whole idea behind our company is we want to kind of like let the community or the society's voice be heard. Through surveys as well as kind of like questions that we ask to people so that we can help organizations, brands, and people like that make better decisions, including government, make better policies in terms of how they want to kind of introduce policies for their people. I started off by kind of building the company up myself. And since then, we have grown after 3 years. So right now we are in 6 different markets in Southeast Asia. So we are present in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. And since I attended the bootcamp until now, we have grown from just myself to about 39 people in our company. So yeah, so that's been the past 3 years journey since I attended the coding bootcamp.
Cool. Right. So as you've realized, for the audience, especially for the alumni, we specifically choose them because we realize that they are founders, but they don't really they're not like super techie. They're not coming from CS background. So I think their experience will be very, very insightful for you guys, right? Okay. So agenda for today, there's 4 different topics that we're going to cover. The reasons, basically, why they founding the startups that they're currently doing. The start, all the trials and tribulations, all the blood, sweat, and tears when you're starting a startup. How to find co-founders, how to recruit, how to find money, how to raise money, and also the present, what's your current stage right now, especially during the COVID times, and the unexpected, the personal insights about what's going to happen if you have a startup. You actually choose to pick this hard life as a startup entrepreneurs. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the questions that that is very relevant to everyone. Tell us reasons why you are choosing to create your startup. Let's start with Gerald.
Since I graduated from school, which is about 12 years ago, I always wanted to do my own thing. And I think I come from the point of view of not wanting to kind of like do a startup because I want to get rich. But I come from the point of view of I want to do a startup because I want to look back and say that, hey, I did this and I made a difference by kind of creating something or a legacy. So throughout my whole career, even before I attended the coding bootcamp, I have been putting myself through opportunities for me to learn the necessary skills for me to be able to actually build this startup. So out of my 12-year career before I attended this bootcamp, before I started this startup, 8 out of this 12 years was spent in other Southeast Asian markets. So I spent 1 year in Philippines, I spent 1 year in Vietnam. I ended up spending 6 years in Thailand. And the reason why I did that was because I knew that the world was bigger than just Singapore. And sometimes when you're in Singapore, you kind of don't really understand how the other kind of like countries work as a society. So I did that for about like 8 years. And then I decided that after 8 years of being exposed to kind of like the different markets and also kind of like the gaps within my industry, I decided I was ready to kind of like embark on a journey to build my own startup. So I came back to Singapore. I attended a coding bootcamp that was, my instructor was Prima in front of you. So I did that for about 3 months. And essentially my whole idea here is I felt that my industry is market research, and market research is where basically you get people to do surveys to help businesses to kind of optimize their business decisions and all this. And I realized that the status quo when it comes to market research really doesn't cater to helping people to get their voices heard because of kind of like very show methodologies of face-to-face research, street intercepts and things where the marketing world has moved so much faster than that so far. So I leveraged kind of like my technology experience that I learned during the boot camp, spent a year kind of like designing the product up and launched an MVP version of the product about 2.5 years ago. And since then have been like really trudging along, trying to build the business up by trying to get to from one stage of MVP to another stage of MVP. And I'm happy to say that right now we are in a good state where we are kind of like present in 6 markets. And it's really kind of like really taking one step at a time in order to kind of like build a business up. It's not something where you think of where you want to be like 10 years later and build it up. You really need to take it at one step at a time. So that's kind of like the history of how I build a startup and why I build a startup. Very much is catered to the fact that I've always wanted to build something for myself. And all the kind of experience that I want to expose myself to so far has been for me to kind of learn the essential skill sets needed for me to build the business, which is Millieu right now. So yeah, cool. so that's from me.
Cool. How about you, Serene? Are you involved with telemedicine like way before Speedoc started?
Gerald's journey is so long. So I'm kind of the exact opposite of Gerald. You know, when I decided that I wanted to do a startup was when I was in the middle of an internship. So for those of you who don't know, my background is actually not in medicine, it's not in healthcare, it's not in tech. My background is actually in traditional advertising. And I remember I was in a firm and like one of my clients was cloud computing, and that was when I decided no, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to do something that I find interesting. So when I graduated, I spent about 2 years, you know, trying to find out what I really wanted to do. You know, I thought about, you know, education startups. I thought about financial startups. At one point, I was even involved in like a social trading startup. And then I was very lucky to meet my partner, Dr. Shravan, who was actually equally passionate. He was a working doctor in the hospitals. We met each other. We hit it off. So both of us quit our jobs to do this together. So that was in 2017. And since then, you know, it's kind of been quite similar to Gerald, you know, taking it one step at a time, making sure that, you know, we build an MVP and then the next MVP and then the next MVP. And then we really try to work in sprints. And other than that, it's just really building the business on a strong foundation and building it block by block. Yeah.
Cool. Right. So MVP, for those public who don't know what MVP means, that's not most valuable player. In this case, in startup world, MVP stands for minimum viable products. So yeah, they're still building it at the moment. That's, I think, the common denominator here. If you are a startup founder, you're going to start building every day. Regarding building, I want to have a questions for Serene. As a non-tech, Serene, do you think having a non-tech background is a setback for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think that maybe from 2 years ago, it is essential to kind of have at least an understanding of what is going on. Have at least an understanding of, you know, basic coding. You don't have to be the best at coding, but you need to understand what's going on. Especially since almost every startup now is definitely tech-based. From 2018 onwards, every startup is tech-based. Not coming from a non-tech background is definitely a setback. You do need to have an understanding of how to build, you know, how to make sure, how to structure your company, how to make sure that everything is you know, modular and fits in together, and how do you build that as a foundation for what you want to be in the future. I think that's very important. So I don't come from a tech background, but I was very lucky enough to have a lot of people in my company. In fact, 2 graduates from your company to join us and build that for us. So I'm trying every day to learn a little bit more about how it's gonna be like.
Cool, cool. Yeah. So what about you, Gerald? As a bootcamp graduate, now looking back before you started this project, this Milieu, do you think it's advisable advice for you to go straight to entrepreneurships after the bootcamps?
So the reason why I attended the boot camp was because I knew that I had industry knowledge. And I knew that the only way to actually kind of bring or disrupt my industry is to bring technology solutions into the industry. So the bootcamp was really useful for me to really understand kind of like data architectures, what's feasible when it comes to coding, and all this. And I think that when I first started my startup, I had two choices. Number one was to kind of throw money to a dev house and say, build this for me, and cross my fingers and make sure that, okay, the product comes out well. My second option was to kind of like go down the whole rabbit hole of building it myself, and then giving it to coders to actually develop it. And I'm very glad that I actually attended kind of like a coding boot camp, because I could build the initial foundations of what I want to achieve that is feasible from a technology point of view, before I pass it on to a dev house to actually code it out. And the second thing is also I managed to kind of really marry my knowledge within kind of like the industry, which is the market research industry, with what's possible when it comes to technology. And this is not something that I can do if I just throw it to a dev house. Because if I throw it to a dev house, they don't have the industry knowledge for them to be able to build it up for what my clients want. So I think that one of the biggest advantage of me joining the bootcamp is not to code myself. I don't really know how to say hello world, even in the first place right now. I've forgotten all about that. But I'm able to understand what technology is capable of when it comes to scoping out features and scoping out how my product actually works. And I think that bootcamp experience really gives me the experience to really kind of build things in a more efficient manner. Yeah.
Cool. Right. Follow up to that. I think it's kind of relevant. I think Gerald mentions that how important for you to know how the tech works before you actually embark the journey with technical developers. But for Serene, do you have any advice for startup entrepreneurs, they call it, with little or no technical backgrounds?
Okay. So if you can learn, for example, going through a boot camp, that would be useful. Like what Gerald said, you don't have to learn how, the super in-depth way of, architecture, structuring the way the whole system works together, but you need to have an understanding of what's going on. If you really have an idea and you think that, if you don't do it within 2 weeks, someone else will come and do it for you, then just find someone with a coding background, like your business partner, then you can do it.
Cool. All right. Okay, let me move on to the next sections. Let's talk about when you start founding a company. What do you think some of them... So how do you start building your team, right? What is the most important part of the team that you would like to start to build, if you can rewind by, right? So Gerald, you have been doing this for a while. Serene, maybe not as much as Gerald, but you have been doing it for a while. How do you start building your team? How do you find your co-founders? How do you start finding your lead developers and all of
that? Who goes first?
Gerald, you can go first.
Yeah, so my initial thought when I first founded the team was a few levels. Number one, to find a co-founder who has experience building a business within the same space. And I think that whenever you do a startup, it's inevitable that you're going to make mistakes that you cannot foresee. So finding a co-founder that has actually went through the whole process of building a business similar to what you're trying to build is important. So I went that direction and found like my mentor, which is my ex-boss, to actually join me to kind of build this business up. So that was one area that I wanted to kind of like cover the gap which is the knowledge in order to kind of avoid or prevent mistakes that will be made when I build my startup. The second was really, I'm very much a more generous person by nature, veering on being a bit too generous whenever I do things. And I really wanted to find a devil's advocate when it comes to building my startup, because I knew my weakness was kind of like veering towards positivity most of the time. So I found another kind of co-founder who is actually currently my CFO, who is actually someone who can question me whenever I make decisions that are wrong. So don't hesitate to find someone who disagrees with you whenever you build a startup. It is very important to find someone who disagrees with you, especially when it comes to areas that you know that are your weaknesses. And that was kind of my initial thoughts when I built my first founding team. And then of course there are different stages to building a startup, building your initial team, as well as like expanding into different kind of markets and all that. But that's a long story, so maybe I'll let Serene answer the question first before we go on to that.
Oh, well, I mean, I think it was very interesting that you just said like there are different stages in the startup, because that was kind of how I was going to approach my answer to this question. So the ideology of building a team was quite similar to the ideology of building a product, which is, done is better than perfect. So having a team was better than having a perfect team, of course, at the first part of the startup. So, the first stage of the startup, the first, 6 to maybe 18 months, you are looking for passion, you're looking for people who believe in you, you're looking for people who are willing to join your team, because, we don't have money, right? So you're looking for people to join your team at very, very low salaries. So I think that was the first stage. And after, the company started gaining more traction, the company started, having a better reputation in the healthcare circles, in the technology circles, that's when, you can start to offer more senior positions to more senior people. And that's when you start to, really build the core team. And that's when you look for expertise. That's when you look for, what the people management skills are. That's when you start to look for, can they bring the company to the next stage? I think Gerald would probably agree with me on that.
Cool. On the topics of recruitments, I've read these articles before from the partners in Y Combinators. Try as much as possible to recruit as later as possible, right? So if you could have a small team and then you could run it, and then you can like have the grits to go through it, go ahead. But is it something that you agree on? Like, do you think as a startup founder who don't really have a technical background, it's good to have a small team, or do you think you need extra help? Maybe Gerald.
I think this is. Gerald was here.
Go ahead.
I mean,
no, Serene, go ahead.
I think generally, this is kind of. I think it goes with how your business is like. So of course, at the beginning of the startup, it's a small team. You wear many hats. You try and do as many things as you can, to keep it in-house, to save money. But of course, I think when you get to like the next stage of growth and you really have to focus your time and your effort, that's when you really have to try and build a team.
Yeah.
How about you, Gerald?
I agree with Serene. I mean, the thing is that you have to set your own milestones. And I would say that you want to err on the side of caution about hiring people before you actually confirm hypothesis that you have in your business. And I think my philosophy around this is when I first built the MVP version of my product, I did it all by myself with one other developer that's not even my own stuff. And the reason for that is because I wanted to confirm the hypothesis that there is market traction, there's product fit before I start to kind of like hire people in. And then I start to hire in kind of like my initial team of like 3 to 4 people to kind of build the business to the next level. And then once you hit the next milestone, then you decide that, okay, I need to kind of build the business even more. So I need to invest in more people to grow the business even more from there. So I think it's a balance between having enough guts or having enough kind of
Risk
bravery to actually hire people
Right.
when you know that your business has hit a milestone, but being conservative in terms of understanding that you need to be very disciplined in terms of knowing that you have hit your milestone before you actually hire more people in.
Right.
So it's a balance between these two. So you can't grow too slowly and you can't grow too fast.
Right.
And I think it's a balance between these two, and you probably need to kind of like lay down different milestones that your business needs to hit before you trigger hiring decisions.
Okay.
And I think that's very important at the start, so that you don't overspend before you actually kind of like confirm the hypothesis that you have at different stages of your business.
Cool. All right, I want to talk about something else related to recruiting that you have not talked about. How about company values, right? So as when you are starting your companies, you probably have you and then your really close friend that you believe in. But how do you build company values? How do you start building? Okay, you hire someone that totally strangers to you. How do you embrace them into your company values? And would you, in your experience, not hire someone if they are not aligned with your company values? Maybe Gerald can go first.
Yes. So when we first kind of like started hiring our initial team, we came up with a test framework. And this test framework was a mixture of cultural fit, which contributes to 40% of the score, and technical skills that contribute to 60% of the score. And we try to kind of like ask questions to suss out how these people actually fit in culturally versus their technical skills as well. Because when you first build a startup, you don't want toxic people in your team. And for me, my philosophy is if someone is extremely good at his job but toxic to everyone else within the company, I'd rather not hire this person and find someone else instead. So setting very good parameters or guidelines in terms of trying to assess someone in terms of the cultural fit versus kind of the technical fit is very, very important, especially at the start. Because if you are a 3 to 4 people team, one person can really poison the team when it comes to how you grow the team as well as the culture of the team itself. So this is one of the key things that we want to kind of like keep in mind as we even grow bigger and bigger.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Serene?
So I think your question kind of deals more with like, culture fit rather than company value. So I do agree with Gerald. When you're a very, very small team, one person can make all the difference. And I think something that we've always believed in is that you hire for the culture that you want to build. But there was something that we realized along the way, so there are people that you hire at the start that are very passionate, and they're very good fit for a very small team. And like I said, because they're passionate, they're willing to work for very little money. And something that we realized on the way is that, someone who is suitable for a startup might not be suitable when you scale up. They're very willing to put in the time and effort, but then they are probably not able to work when the environment gets a little bit more structured, when your company, grows and expands and you become more process driven. So someone that you hire is very important, but how you grow gracefully and how maybe, some people are not a good fit, and being able to let them go gracefully and in a good note is also very important.
Yep. Good stuff. Right. So now I want to talk about not your team, right? So, well, you can consider them as your team. What about how do you pick your investors, right? So now we're talking about how you raise money, which is another topic that I think lots of audience here are curious about. How do you start convincing strangers, or maybe someone that you know, to give money to you? And how do you make sure that they are aligned with how you want to progress with your company? Maybe Serene first.
So basically that's investor relations, right? Convincing people that you don't know that they know you very well, that they know your startup very well, and convincing them to give you large amounts of money, to ticket sizes, a few millions, things like that. The first of all, of course, you need to have a product that brings value, right? If they can see your value, it gets much easier. I think something you said was also very resonant, that you have to be able to find investors that are strategic. They shouldn't just be rich people with deep pockets and money to, you know, throw around, because that would not bring you as far as someone with the same ticket size or maybe a smaller ticket size, but is more strategic as an investor. So I think the first thing to do is make sure that your product adds value. Be very sure of what value you add to the market. Be very sure of your numbers. You know, understand what is the market size, understand what is the addressable market, understand where you're going to be in the next 3 to 5 years, because investors at the end of the day are interested in exiting, they're interested in making money. So you need to be very sure, not just of your numbers now, but of your numbers in 3 to 5 years time, and where the market is heading in 3 to 5 years time.
Okay. How about you, Gerald? How do you handle investor relationship?
So I got to confess, the investor fundraising side of entrepreneurship is actually my least preferred side of growing my business. I mean, there are different entrepreneurs, right? There are entrepreneurs that kind of like, they really want to go out and raise money, and raising money is really the bulk of their job. I'm kind of like a very different founder, where I concentrate more in terms of my product. And to me, raising funds is really kind of like means to an end, in terms of bringing my business to the next level. So I have a tough time sometimes kind of like asking people for money,
Right.
And trying to convince them about that. And I still continue to face this issue at this point of time. But for me, my philosophy is, if I can build a good product, not only just build a good product, but the numbers or the performance of the product actually validates itself. That's how I convince people to actually provide me money to kind of like bring the business to the next level.
Right.
So I'm a very much kind of like product focused person when it comes to fundraising, where I feel that as long as the product provides results, as long as the product actually kind of excites investors, then the money will come naturally. Exactly. But at the same time, I don't know how closed doors this chat is, but there are good investors and there are bad investors. And there are investors that are just really in it to kind of like exit as much as possible, with as much ROI as possible. And there are also investors that really trust in you and really trust in your product. And you need to be able to distinguish between these two different kind of investors when it comes to selecting investors to invest in you. And I would say that a lot of it, there is no playbook to it. There's no cheat sheet to it. A lot of it's got to do with gut feeling and an honest assessment of how excited the investor is in terms of what you're trying to build, versus how many questions they ask you in terms of just a very monetary perspective to it.
Yeah.
So there's no hard and fast rule around it. It's just kind of like gut feeling as you kind of like talk to different investors.
Okay, cool. All right, so we talked about teams and investors. Now I want to talk about you guys specifically. As a startup, I think there's a misconceptions here that as a startup founders, you'll be coding a lot, or you'll be trudging a lot, trying to get raise funds. But eventually, you also need to manage people, right? You need to manage your team. From what I've gathered, Gerald, everybody make mistakes, right? As a CEO itself, you make mistakes. So how do you deliver bad message or bad news to your team? And how do you maintain your team to be engaged even though you have some setbacks? Serene, Gerald, whoever.
Yeah, so I always think of a startup as a roller coaster, meaning that it's always a curve, right? Yeah. Where you go up and down, every unforeseen problem that you face, you go down, and then when you solve the problem, you go up. And then after that, it's inevitable that when you do startups, because it's venturing into new territory, you always face another kind of setback, and then it goes down again. What I tell my staff is always, it's okay for the curve to go up and down in terms of the roller coaster, but the starting point of the roller coaster and the ending point of the roller coaster, you shouldn't be going up and down at the same rate. Meaning like your down shouldn't bring you back to the same position as your initial position. It should always bring you to the next level. And I always tell my team this, right? It's inevitable that you face issues whenever you build startups and everything. But as long as you know that you have solved an issue and your business is at a higher level than it previously was before you solved this issue, then you're in the right direction. Then you are kind of like making progress when it comes to your startup. Yeah. There is no ideal situation where it's just a direct line up all the way. There's no startups that face that because you're venturing into new territory. So just need to kind of keep in mind that your starting base and where you end up with after solving your problem has to be higher than where you started off before solving your problem. And that's the benchmark that I always get my team to kind of like look at whenever they face problems, and that keeps them going because they know that there is progress even though they face problems and they have to solve problems as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Serene, what do you think?
I think, when I first, when we first started hiring, and then, when I had to, deal with people management for the first time in my life, when people reported me for the first time in my life, I think that was a bit difficult. And I think there was this, I attended this event, and it was the co-founder of Grab, Hui Ling. And she said something like this: oh, all of y'all think that Grab is like this big successful company, but you don't know that, when we first started, setbacks could happen, 1 hour after the first setback. And it will go on and on and on, and it never gets easier. And I think that helped me, like, it's not something wrong that you're doing. It's just that setbacks will keep happening because, like Gerald said, you're venturing into new territory, not just because you're a startup, but also because as a founder, you are being a founder for me, it's the first time,
Yeah.
You are getting people reporting to you for the first time. You are handling people management for the first time. And I think a lot of it goes back down to trust and communication. Open communication channels. If your staff are getting burnt out, you need to understand, okay, you're getting burnt out, you communicate, we're trying to hire, but there are things like notice periods, there are things like, interview processes. I can solve the burnout, but I can't solve it tomorrow. I think it's important to communicate to your staff that I can problem solve, but maybe I can't problem solve in a timely manner. I can problem solve, but maybe I can't problem solve in totality. And if there's trust, there's communication, they understand that, there's some results from the problems that they bring up, that I think it gets a little bit easier.
Okay, cool. All right, so let me just get a quick break for everyone. So welcome again for those who join in quite late. As I mentioned, that we have our questions in Slido. So if you want to submit your questions, please do. I want to do some quick polls here for those who are joining the sessions. I want to know, what are your biggest concerns to not run your startup now, right? So you can type whatever you think is the biggest concern, right? And at the same time, I also want to make, like I said, I want to make it as interactive as possible. So if you have anything that you want to ask now to the panel of the speakers regarding, founding of startups and whatnot, please use the raise hand features, and then you can talk to this panel directly. Okay, some people, the calls are failures. While we're gathering feedbacks from the audience. So if you could put 3 adjectives that, will be essential as a startup CEO, what would it be, Serene?
3 adjectives that everybody, well, passion is one, because it's really not easy, especially me and my founder, we decided to run a 24-hour operations. So number 1, you do need passion. You need resilience, because failure is going to come again and again and again. You will face rejection again and again and again. And resilience is, understanding how to get back up. So passion, resilience, and courage, I think. Being able to get up again and do it all over again the next day.
Gerald?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, passion is the most important. When you do a startup, you're kind of investing all of your time into it. And if you don't have passion, then naturally it will just fall apart one day. So having passion in terms of what you're trying to achieve and what kind of difference you want to bring to people within your industry or on a broader basis is super important.
Right.
The second one is perseverance. There are many times where you really want to give up, and you just kind of like want to flip your table and just say, let's not do this anymore, and not do it. So I think perseverance is very important, because sometimes at the darkest moments of building a startup, you do not see the light, and you need to persevere further before you actually see the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to building a startup. And I think the third one is a vision for me. And I think that one thing that you need to really understand when you build a startup is no matter what space you're playing in, you are competing with big players, or you're competing with players that know that if your business kind of like gains traction, these big players will start to kind of like come in and try to compete with you. So that always looking forward 3 steps ahead in terms of how you can build your product so that it is ahead of your competition. It's another very important thing when it comes to making sure that your business has longevity when it comes to like building your product up to the point where you have achieved what you want to achieve when it comes to how big you want your business to be. So
Okay.
yeah.
Right. Let's take a look at the questions now. We have a few questions here from the audience. Let's look at the first one. Have you been in a position where your company had to pivot or refocus your operations? If so, what made you decide to do that? Serene?
I'm trying to think. Okay, so I think the most relevant answer to this question, because from the beginning we really haven't pivoted, we just added more services. But like I said, I was running 24 operations, my staff was getting burnt out, they were not getting enough rest. So we actually had to do like a cost analysis of whether it made sense to keep our operations running throughout the night. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to that, right? It comes down to what is the cost? Is it human cost? Is it human capital? Is it the money that you spend trying to run your operations this way? So I think when we did the cost analysis, that it made sense to continue running as a 24-hour service. But if you're talking about pivoting, I think that the same considerations would apply. Does it make sense to pivot and make sure that you do your cost analysis?
Okay. How about you, Gerald? Have you pivoted before?
Yeah, so I haven't pivoted before, but a very excellent example of where I had to pivot or actually kind of like adapt is what has happened in the past 4 months, which is COVID-19. I think COVID-19 has kind of like thrown a spanner or a curveball, no matter what kind of company you are. And because Millieu is essentially a B2B company, right. So as long as our clients actually suffer from the consequences of COVID-19, we will also suffer as a consequence of that, because they will cut back on spending and things like that. So the past kind of like 3 months has really been super challenging when it comes to making sure the business survives, and making sure that we target the right kind of like clients in terms of trying to survive as a business and also grow as a business as well. And the whole idea here is try to predict what's going to happen in the future. When it happens, it's too late for you to react. Okay. And I think the whole idea behind like how the management of my company worked was that early on in January or early February, we already decided that this is going to be a big problem for us, especially for some of our anchor clients. And we actively went out to kind of like canvas or source for more clients that we knew will not be so affected by this COVID-19 situation. Yep. And we were glad that we did that at that point of time. Because if we did that like just 1 month ago, or we just did that just right now, it will be a bit too late. when it comes to reacting to the situation. So I think the main situation that I had to pivot my business was really what happened in the last 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so we're gonna continue again with this quick fire Q&A towards the end of the session. So again, if you have any questions, just feel free, just add it here, and then we're gonna go through that. Okay, I also wanna go back to what are biggest concerns. So not a lot of you are responding, but I see someone mentioned opportunity cost, which leads to my next question. So if you have ideas right now, but you're not so convinced because you are right now, everything is in unpredictable times, right? Left and right, people get retrenched. Do you think it's good to start your ideas while you're working as a full-time, or you think now, looking back as someone who started a company, do you think it's not possible? Do you think it's you have to go 100% in starting a company, or do you think you could do a side hustle? Serene?
I think that it's very important to have financial stability when you first start your startup, because you won't be able to pay yourself. So whether that comes from having a full-time job, or whether that comes from savings, or whether that even comes from personal wealth, that is. But I think the most important is financial stability. Can you afford to eat for 6 months? If you can, then do whatever it takes.
Gerald?
I'm kind of a all of nothing kind of guy. So I'm kind of like, if I want to do something, I'll just kind of like go into it. I feel that I'll just handle the whole sustenance part of my life if things fail. And I just have this very different approach to doing things. Okay. I feel like if you are trying to build something up that will someday become big, there is no escape from investing 100% time into it.
Right.
Because that's the only way that you can actually kind of like do well. But if you are trying to come out with an MVP, or if you're trying to come up with a minimum viable level of your product to confirm your hypothesis, then I think it's possible to do it part-time. But once you confirm your hypothesis, I don't think you can escape from going 100% into it. Okay. Unless you're doing like e-commerce businesses, or you are doing kind of like a side e-commerce business where you're just selling products. So the nature of the business also happens, but I think the nature of the business also correlates to the ceiling of your business, right? Okay. And if you want your business to have high ceiling, then you probably want to kind of like really invest 100% of your time into it. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Right. So moving on to the next sections, the current time. Let's just start with the elephant in the room. Do you think it's a good time to start a company now? Gerald?
Depends on the company that you're trying to start.
Okay.
I think inherently you don't want to start a pub right now. you don't want to kind of open a club right now.
Yeah.
But so a lot of it's got to depend on what kind of business are you building, and is this current situation a good time for you to address a need in the market? And I always go back to demand and supply. And at the end of the day, it's a case of, is there demand for the product right now? And is there sufficient supply of this service right now? And if there's a mismatch when it comes to demand and supply, then yeah, that should inform you whether it's the right time to start your business. Okay. So always go back to this idea about whether your business addresses a need at this point of time, no matter whether it's COVID-19 or not. And through my experience over the last 3 months, COVID-19 has impacted the economy in unprecedented levels, but there's still a lot of opportunities out there when it comes to what COVID-19 brings as well. And one thing that you really need to know is that once the COVID-19 situation recovers,
it will bounce back.
The world will be in a new order. There will be a new normal. Yeah. And I think that this whole new normal is a perfect opportunity for you to tackle if you understand what this new normal is well enough. So I think that it's good opportunity for you to start planning what your business is, considering that the world will change once this whole COVID-19 situation stabilizes.
Okay. And for you, Serene, I know that you start earlier than everyone. Like you're coming in
Your
way
business
earlier.
is perfect, man.
Yeah, I mean, we've been lucky that, you know, we didn't have to retrench. In fact, we're hiring now. So we have been lucky in a way, but you know, the next crisis is not going to be so kind to us. I think what Gerald said is very true. You know, there's going to be a new world, and don't just look at like Singapore, you know, for your reference. You know, don't try and, you know, make the next food delivery app or the next, you know, last mile delivery. Try and look at the region or the world, and try and gauge what the new needs of the world are going to be. And I mean, COVID aside, right, there's no real right time to start a business. There's never gonna be, you know, someone reaching out to you and say, hey, you know, here is like $1 million, would you like to start a company with me? There is no right time, there is no perfect time. There is always going to be something that is preventing you. There's always going to be opportunity cost. But if you're talking about predicting new needs in the new world, I think this would be as good a time as any.
Yeah. So I just want to raise, like, I think I also stumbled upon an article a few weeks ago about the last financial crisis is where Twitter is out, where the Stripe is out, where GitHub is up. You know, like all of those companies, where Uber was up, was that around that time. So I think yes, it's not easy right now. Everyone's are having a tough times, but opportunities ahead. I think it's still, you know, it's unpredictable. So might as well just try, right? Okay, so I want to go to the final bits of the sessions. We want to talk about some personal questions here, right? So nothing related to your technicalities and whatnot, but not about founding and anything. But let's start with the concept of doing something unscalable at the start, right? So for those who are not so familiar with what happens, like Airbnb, right? They start with doing unscalable thing. They actually go through every single rooms to recruit their new clients. Stripes, they you know, just talk among their potential customers, and then, you know, install Stripes in their computers right away. So for you personally, do you have to do this? Like, do you have to do the unscalable part of your company in order to grab your clients or grab your customers? Serene?
I think for us it's a little bit different because we're in healthcare. We can't induce people to fall sick. You know, and it's against the law to tell people, hey, you look very sick, you know, you should come to us. So in a way, we were kind of bound by regulations. But yes, you know, for sure, we had to do a lot of unscalable things to find partnerships. We had to do a lot of unscalable things to get people to hear about us, especially since we were so bound by regulations.
Okay. Gerald?
Yeah, so for me, you have to go the unscalable way before you can go the scalable way. And I feel that that's my approach since I started the business. What I mean by here is that scalable means automation. Scalable means coming out with a standardized way that kind of addresses most of the pain points and the needs of the wider industry. And you will never know how to build that automation. You will never know how to build that need. And you will never know how to address those needs without going through the hard path of actually understanding those needs from an unscalable way at the start. So what I mean by this is I could build automation in my product to actually serve 90% of my customers. The only way I knew what automation was needed in my product to address 90% of what my clients need was to go down the route of servicing as many clients as possible in the most unscalable way possible before understanding how I want to automate the whole process. If you go straight into the whole automated scalable process, maybe you're automating your product in the wrong way. That doesn't address the needs of most of your clients or most of the people that are using your product. And that has always been kind of like the way that I build it. I mean, not the luxury, but the privilege I have is I've been 10 years in the industry. So a lot of the unscalable lessons that I've learned it in my past career. And therefore I could translate it very quickly into what I wanted to include in my product. But if you're unfamiliar with your industry, don't make assumptions in terms of what people need. Try to go down the route of actually servicing them the hard way in order to understand exactly what they need before you go down and make critical decisions when it comes to product development and things like that. So, yeah.
Cool. All right, let's start with something easier now. What are some of the things that you cannot do now because you're a co-founder? Like what, now that you are a co-founder, you realize there are things that you cannot do anymore because you're a co-founder. I believe there must be one. Gerald?
I cannot cut my hair.
That's everyone, Gerald. Gerald?
There's a need for discipline when it comes to delegation. I think one of the biggest temptations of founders is because they build a product up from scratch at the start. The hardest part to go to the next level is letting go. And empowering other people to do exactly what you do. And sometimes there's this temptation of only I can do it to this level. No one else can do it at this level. But if you always take on that mentality, then your business is always going to be small, right? Because only everything sticks with you. So you need to be very disciplined in terms of understanding where are the critical points of times where you need to let go on certain responsibilities so that your business can go to the next level. And to me, that is one of the biggest challenges, actually, to be honest, that I face at this point of time in building my business, which is learning where to let go and learning where to apply or implement the right training to your staff so that they can do the same thing as well. So I'm still learning and I'm still going through the process. So I won't say that I'm perfect when it comes to knowing how to do this. But it's super important if you really want to get a higher ceiling when it comes to how your business is growing.
But what about your personal life? When's the last time you traveled?
I mean, my wife is Thai, so I travel to visit my wife very often. But at the same time, my business is now in 6 markets in Southeast Asia. So we had all these plans to travel every month to every market. But before that happened, then all the travel restrictions kicked in. So I'm saving on travel budgets, but I'm supposed to travel. I just can't at this point in time.
Okay. How about you, Serene? How does it affect your personal life?
Well, first of all, I hope the sound quality is not so bad because my mic stopped working. Second of all, I'm so glad that Gerald answered first because that's exactly, what I wanted to say, but I didn't have the words to say, that there should be discipline in delegation. I think one more thing that's important to note is discipline about, resting, making sure that what you're doing is sustainable because, of course, as a startup founder, you're like, oh, I need to do this. Oh, I need to do that. Oh, that is important. Everything is important. Everything needs to be done tonight. Or actually, everything needs to be done yesterday. But we rest so that we can go further the next day. Everything that we do has to be sustainable because if you die of exhaustion tomorrow, there's not going to be a startup down the road. So I think discipline about rest, discipline about making your operations sustainable is very important.
Right. And last questions before we start, before we finish and go to the Q&A sections. What are some misconceptions people thought that's not true about co-founder? Maybe Serene?
I think that I face a lot of, I wouldn't say misconceptions, but I think that the world is inherently more unfriendly. And I really don't want to play the sexist card, but the world is really more unfriendly to young female co-founders. I really had to work extra hard to be on the same level as my male counterparts. And I think it's very important to just be sincere about what you're doing, just to be passionate about what you're doing. continue working hard, and at the end of the day, your results will speak for itself.
Go, Serene. I support you. But what was the question again?
question is that misconceptions that's not true about co-founder that you heard so far. Like they have to wake up early, 5 a.m. every day. All of those books that says how co-founders should be. Do you find any misconceptions so far?
I think that one misconception that some people might have about an entrepreneur might be the fact that fundraising is kind of like the most important be all and all top priority that you have to focus on. And some founders truly believe in that. It's all about raising money for kind of like growing the business and all that. But to me, like I feel that building a successful business is really getting your hands dirty, going down and really understanding your business, building it from the ground up, and all that. So there's a lot of kind of snazzy articles out there about founders. I think what's that company? The co-working space. WeWork.
Yeah.
Has this whole idea about like I just need to raise funds, and my business will be successful. And you've seen how it has unraveled so far. So I think when it comes to building businesses, don't be so tempted by this glamour of raising funds and all this. If you're really passionate about your business, focus more on your business, and the fundraising part will come naturally as means to an end to kind of build your business to the next level. And I think that the fundraising world or the venture world or the kind of funds in the world is increasingly realizing that as time goes by, learning from Uber, learning from kind of different like startups where it's all about conquer the world or nothing. And it's all about pumping money in and losing money just to kind of like gain market share. I think that the fundraising world it will gradually, increasingly realize that investing in the fundamentally healthy business is more important. And I think that is something that sometimes founders kind of like misconceive, which is just raise as much money as I can and everything else will fall naturally. And like for some people it will, for some people it might not. So
okay. Yeah. Cool. All right. So we reached the final part of the session, which is the Q&A sessions. Again, if you want to talk to the panels directly, feel free, just raise your hand and then we'll try to accommodate that. Rachel is behind me organizing this to make sure that it's possible. So just use the raise hand features and let us know. But I'm going to start sourcing the questions from the audience now. I got one from Hardik right now. While creating a new product or service, how to secure the business from big sharks in a similar market?
Big sharks as in competitors?
Competitors, yeah, I think.
How to secure a business in big sharks? There's no one answer to that. Some of that has got to do with finesse, meaning don't share everything with everyone. Even before you build it up. So timing is immensely important when it comes to building your business up. So don't kind of like share your business idea in the public so that people can copy you before you reach a point where you have built it up and build that competitive lead time versus the rest of the people. I think that's one thing that you have to do. And I think the second thing is build your business so that there's some magic in it that people cannot replicate so easily. And I can't have a good idea of what that magic is. The magic will come from going down the rabbit hole in terms of building a business and coming out of it and going through that actual effort of like building a business up. once you go through the hard work of going down the rabbit hole and coming up from it, it's not something that's easily replicable by people. Simply because you have put in all the hard work to actually build those kind of like features of your product out and your value proposition. So there's two things. One is finesse, one is timing and just really being very careful in terms of competitors. The second thing is really putting in hard work to kind of really build the magic in your product that people cannot replicate. I think that's the two things from me.
And how about you, Serene? Telemedicine is big competitions right now. So
yeah, I think that whether you're in a saturated market or you're in like a very over-regulated market like healthcare, like we are in, the competition from the so-called big shots is very high because they have the money, they have the resources. So I think you need to understand, as a startup, what are your advantages? Because definitely you have disadvantages, right? You don't have the pockets that the big players have. You don't have the reputation that the big players have. So what is really your competitive advantage? Is it that you are closer to the ground, that you're able to pivot faster? Is it that you have, more passionate people who are able to provide the kind of service that creates stickiness for your product? And you need to understand why people use you. Is it because the customer service or the service recovery is far beyond what bigger companies can provide? And I think it's not just the big players that are the problem. The tastes and preferences in the people change much more frequently and are much more fickle these days. So it's important to understand the shifts in society as well.
Okay. I think Hardik also have a follow-up questions now.
I can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Hi. So second follow-up question is also related to similar the first one, how to avoid the idea to be copied. Okay. I understand that both of you guys had extremely good internet-based business, that I would put it that way. So how exactly did you start with when you were there in the initial phase to avoid your website to be copied? I would put it that way. How did you break it to different people? When I start my own service, web service, I'm IT literate, but I cannot do it myself. So I will hire someone from freelance or someone who could do it for myself. But if I give him the whole idea, then possibly he can float it by himself itself. So how should I break it up, or how did you guys break it up and start the things?
So number one, always
Good
sign
question.
an NDA. If you want a draft version of an NDA, I'll send it to you. But always sign an NDA to make sure that your IP and your business is protected. That's super important as you try to kind of like build your business up. So that's one thing. The second thing is, and this is one of the things that I missed to bring out kind of like at the start of what I was trying to talk about here is, I'm not sure whether you have heard of this business called Qualtrics. Qualtrics is really kind of like a survey platform where they provide very advanced features when it comes to building surveys. And when I first started this company, I knew that I could never compete with Qualtrics because Qualtrics has billions of dollars that they can invest to make their technology better than mine. So instead of focusing on kind of like what Qualtrics does, which is building power features, I focus more in terms of speed, ease of use, and all those kind of stuff. So don't try to kind of like compete with big players in their value proposition. Try to kind of like carve out your own value proposition where there are no players actually doing that at this point of time. But at the same point of time, only announce these features to people when you have built it up to the point where it's ready to launch. Don't kind of like try to tease people with what your product is even before launch so that people can catch up with you before you launch. It's all about the technology lead time that you have against your competitors that you need to just be aware about. Yeah.
Okay.
Serene.
I think that coming from, more of like, already operating a startup. So of course you try and meet and you try and work with good people. And if you meet and you work with good people, you try to keep them invested in your startup success so that, they don't, they don't play you out and things like that. You try and engineer win-win situations where both sides will win. But if you meet like not so good people and, you end up leaving on a bad note, then you try to make sure that you yourself constantly innovate, that your startup constantly, is 6 months ahead or 12 months ahead or 18 months ahead of the closest competition. You try and engineer your competitive advantage to be, as advantageous to you as possible. And you try to constantly create the lead time, like Gerald said.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Hardik. Okay, so let's go to the Q&A sessions. Let's go to the first one. So what are some of the tips on searching for a co-founder? I think this is a common thread with anyone who's trying to start up something. How do you search for a co-founder? And how do you divide roles between co-founders? Serene?
I think that, okay, so when you're starting to look for a co-founder, I think the primary point is to find someone as passionate as you. Because at the beginning, when you're a small team, all you have is passion. You don't have money, you have an idea, but you don't really have a product. So all you have is passion. That's important. And how do you split the roles? I think I was very lucky in a way where my founder and I had very different backgrounds. He was a medical doctor and I came from advertising. So we split the roles very cleanly. I don't really have super good advice. If you come from very similar backgrounds, maybe Gerald will be able to weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, when I first found co-founders, my thought process was finding a co-founder that can bring me to the next level, and also finding a co-founder that can complement my skills or kind of have skills that I currently don't have. And that's why I think earlier part of this session I mentioned that my early stage co-founders, one of them is someone who has been there, done that, and has built a business in my industry. And therefore will be able to give me advice on what kind of mistakes not to make, and also have the connections and the network to actually help us to scale the business up very quickly. So that was the first thing that I wanted to find in a co-founder, and right now this person is actually the chairman of my company. The other co-founder that I try to find is someone who is very, very different from me, meaning that whatever skill sets I have, I also have weaknesses, and I also have things that I don't know how to do, or I also have kind of logical biasness based on my personality. And I think it's important to find a co-founder who actually can think from an angle that you cannot think from. And that's this whole devil's advocate kind of like concept when it comes to finding co-founders. So for me, it's like two different co-founders. One is to bring the business to the next level. Another is to complement whatever skill sets I have by having skill sets that I don't have. Yeah. So.
Okay. Cool. Right. So Gerald, since we're there, Gerald, could you provide some examples of the milestones you mentioned just now before hiring?
I can't see the full question. What's the full question?
Okay.
Gerald, could you provide some examples of milestones? I cannot see the bracket.
Bracket. Oh, before hiring. Could you provide some examples of the milestones before hiring that you spoke about?
Yeah, so as you know, my business is a survey platform. And I think that initially, the first thing I wanted to kind of like confirm was my hypothesis that providing an app that actually makes it more engaging for consumers to answer surveys, that will lead to better unit economics when it comes to cost per acquisition or cost per install. For every user that joins to our platform. The other thing is it leads to better data quality. And that was the initial hypothesis that I want to confirm. So even before I hire anyone, I work with just one single developer to build an MVP version of the app, and I launched it in Singapore and Thailand. And then within about 3 to 4 months, I went to about 30,000 users in Singapore. at a cost per acquisition of 15 cents. And I got down to about 200,000 users in Thailand at a cost per acquisition of, I think, 5 cents. And that was the milestone that I hit, that I realized that I'm on the right track, and I'm building a product that can be replicated across other markets. And that gave me confidence to raise a seed round of funding. So I raised a seed round of funding of about 700K US to build an initial team of about 8 to 9 people to join us. So that's one example of the milestone. And then the next milestone we hit was client acquisition, right? So we could acquire users, but could we make money from the platform? And so I used this $700,000 to build the initial team that helped to build the initial product, and kind of like allow us to kind of get initial traction with clients. And truth be told, like 7 months after that round of fundraising, we managed to get up to 40 different clients. And many hundreds of thousands of users more. And just November last year, I closed a 2.4 million USD round to kind of like bring the business to Southeast Asia. So that's kind of like the different milestones that I've hit so far. And for me now, it's just really kind of like hitting the other milestone, which is getting this whole regional business up and running.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I think we have 2 more questions left. I think, how do you get established companies to form partnership with you, especially when you don't have any track record? How do you get them on board? Serene?
So I saw that question, and I think my first response to that is that startups come in stages. You know, day one, if you're a startup, you're probably not going to get an established company to work with you. The second thought that I had, that came to the forefront of my mind is that most important is profitability. So, you cannot be fussy about the size of the company that you work with. If this person or this company or this individual gives you business, then you just try and take it. Of course, don't do illegal things. So, and in the end, startups come in stages, right? You have to focus on building the track record. You have to focus on building legitimacy. You have to focus on building, a reputation in the industry that you work with before established companies will open their door to you. And of course, the second thing is, never stop hustling. Continue banging on doors. One day, one door will open. And once you sign that first client, the other doors will start to open.
Okay, cool. Gerald?
Yeah, I agree. Like your first 2 to 5 clients is the most critical and the hardest to get when it comes to building a business up. So once you get the 2 to 5 clients, then the rest will be kind of like leveraging on that track record to build your business further. So I totally agree with Serene when she mentioned that really hustle to get that initial client base, then everything else will just be a stepping stone from there. I guess for me also, I think I had the benefit of being in the industry for a long time. So as I mentioned, I made a conscious decision to work out of Philippines for a year, work out of Thailand for 6 years, and work out of Vietnam for a year. So I've already built kind of like pre-existing relationships with big clients within the industry. And that allowed me to actually kind of like build my own, kind of like sell on my own credit, even before the company sells on its credit. And I guess that has been something that has been advantageous to me. So I guess my main point here is that for some businesses, you might want to just start it without any experience.
Okay.
For younger people who just are fresh out of school, maybe you want to just kind of like join the industry first, experience the industry for a while, before actually trying to build your own thing. So you build your own network of clients or contacts within the industry, understand the industry better, before you embark on building your own thing. So different people have different journeys, but if you have the luxury of time, sometimes it's always good to get some initial experience within the industry first before you kind of like move on to start your own thing. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So I think the rest of the question is quite similar to what we have discussed. So I think we can do a wrap up. So before we go to feedbacks and then whatnot, any last words from you guys? Thank you so much for the time today. Any last word for my alumni, for the public who, you know, wanted to start a company now? You know, just give a shout out. Maybe Serene?
I forgot to congratulate Gerald on closing a round successfully. Congratulations, Gerald. That's
Thank you.
very, very good news.
Yeah.
Second of
My
all,
lifespan shortened after that.
yeah, that's like, yeah, every day my hair falls out, you know, every day my lifespan shortens. Every day I feel like I might get a heart attack. But that's life. The second thing is that, you know, I had a glimpse of someone who asked, you know, if you want to be the new Netflix. And I think my advice to that person specifically is Netflix already exists. You know, don't try to be the next Netflix, because you wouldn't be able to catch up. Like what Gerald said, don't play with big players in their value proposition. Try to figure out what the unmet need in the market is.
Okay. Gerald, last words?
Yeah, so I would say that if you want to build a startup, just kind of like prime yourself for a lot of suffering, a lot of trials, a lot of tribulations. Don't start a startup just because of the glamour of starting a startup. Start a startup because you truly believe in what you want to build. And there will be points where you kind of want to give up. And those points will be more than the points where you feel like you want to go further. So kind of be very persistent in what you do, and don't make the whole idea of jumping to create a startup very carefully. Make that decision very carefully. Don't make that decision in a very casual manner, because it's really, really hard work. I gotta say. So just be kind of like really, really sure before you actually embark on this journey.
Yep. I think that sums things up. Thank you again for Gerald and Serene for the time. Again, I repeat for everyone, if you want to see this recordings again, just make sure that you check your email. We will send it over to you after this. And also, please submit your feedbacks. You know, like I said, this Career Week Sessions is our initiatives, and we wish to do it further and further in the future. So if you have any feedbacks for us, you know, the length, the session, whatnot, please do so. Some of your feedbacks there, and that's it, right? So thank you everyone for coming. May the 4th be with you. This is May 4th. Thank you.
Keep safe, guys.
Yeah, stay safe, everyone.
All right. Cheers, and nice to meet you, Serene.
Nice to meet you, Gerald and Prima.
Nice to meet you, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
All right. Bye.